Alright, so Guy on Games, obviously I'm discussing Darksiders 1 and 2, which were created by the late and great THQ. Let that rhyme. THQ actually stands for Toy Headquarters, for anyone who just didn't know that. It's THQ's Toy Headquarters. And while they are unfortunately no longer a company, their IPs have gone off to other companies. I'm not sure who Darksiders ended up going off to, but I know obviously Saints Row has gone to Deep Silver, and of course, Saints Row 4 is coming out um, this week actually. So I would be doing Saints Row the Third. All these videos that you see have been uploaded. I've done like I think four today, or I'm gonna end up doing four by the end. But I'll get to that. More of the THQ stuff later. But Darksiders went into pretty fun games. Obviously, two is a lot better than one. Actually, they did. There's a drastic change in just the entire style of the game from one to two. But each game, basically, an open world dungeon crawler that revolves around the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Darksiders 1 starts off with war, and then Darksiders 2 is with death. And Darksiders 1 with war, it starts off with the apocalypse, so there are humans and demons and angels, all over the place. Humans are just, getting pummeled by, angels and demons, of course, mostly demons. But, mankind is being destroyed as start off the game, and then, you go through the paces where you have pretty much all your powers, or at least all your powers with War's main sword, and all his special abilities. And then you go through, you fight a boss at the end, you actually defeat it, and then he pretty much goes to talk to these basically like three heads, and they try to keep balance, between light and dark. And while you're doing this, it's actually a really short amount of time, but the time there is a lot slower than on Earth. So when you go back to Earth, it's actually like decades later. So it's you think it's only been pretty much a few hours, but it's been like hundreds of years. I said decades, but I think it was actually like centuries. And so you go back, there are no humans, there's just none of that, and it's just angels and demons, and you pretty much go and try to correct a wrong that was created. And basically, all the blame was put on War, that he started the apocalypse early when he wasn't supposed to, and he was actually being set up. So you go through the game, and you fighting angels and demons, and you're trying to set things back in order and prove that basically help War prove that he wasn't the one that did this. And you go through the game, and I actually really enjoyed the game. For I actually thought the story was actually very well done. There's some twists here and there that are pretty cool. And something I really enjoy is actually the references to the other horsemen. And in this world, they use, they keep war and death, and I believe they take out pestilence and famine, and they use strife, and I can't remember the other one, but one is a woman and she has like a whip, and the other, I believe strife is the one, and he uses guns. And so in both Darksiders 1 and 2, you basically get a gun, but you don't actually get a whip from her character, but you do get a gun from Strife's character. Or not from his character, but you do get a gun that, Strife made at some point in time, and you end up finding it, in the world, or having it repaired or something like that. And I always thought, that was kind of a little cool thing that they did to nod to, the other horsemen, in this universe. And actually, in the first game, you do get a scythe, which of course references death, but there are also crows pretty much all over the game. And actually, if you shoot them, you get health. And I didn't realize that for a long time, until I think I did it by accident once. And I killed a crow, and I actually got health, and I thought maybe this is death supporting his brother, because he doesn't feel that it's right that he's being pretty much stripped of all his powers, and subjugated to just being like cast out as a horseman. And so maybe he's still supporting his brother in some way. And so I thought that was just a random cool thing that they don't really mention that into where he does send crows out or anything, but it's obviously a reference to death, with crows being accompanied by death, pretty much. And so, that's just a random little cool thing they had in the game. But the biggest portion of the game is the fact that it is, a open world dungeon crawler type game. And with it being open world, you can pretty much go wherever you want in the beginning, except you can't always get past what you want in the beginning because you don't have a specific weapon or a specific power up to a weapon you already own or something like that. And so it goes through a lot of the dynamics where, like older games, like I guess like Legend of Zelda, where you can go here and there, but you don't have this weapon, so maybe you can't get across this gap, or you can't open this door because you don't, it's too heavy, so you need a certain, weapon that gives you more strength, things like that. And that's how it works as it goes through this story, and it has RPG elements where it does show how much damage you're doing when you hit enemies. And even though it has that, it's not really a huge part of the game. It doesn't feel like it does as much as you would think, but in two, it makes a lot more sense. But as for the first one, it's in the game, but it doesn't seem as critical as it does in two, which has a lot more RPG elements. But the first one you go through, you get your power ups, you get your weapons, and I actually like how they do the power ups because even though it's one of the games where it starts off where you have all your abilities. Generally, when games do that, for some reason, it never hurts to have that experience in the very beginning and then get stripped of your powers because they never make it last too long. And even when you have all your powers, generally, unless you play that scene over and over again, you won't really experience all the powers because you'll be trying to pretty much go through the game. And even if you do experience all the powers, you won't be able to experience them, so much that it, depletes the fun value of them once you unlock them later in the game. So it's pretty cool that they had that where you get to see his, like he has like his pretty much ultimate horseman form where he's like a giant dragon, and you go through the town and you just like destroy things pretty much, and you unlock that. I think a little bit more than halfway through the game actually. You finally um, unlock that power again, but you only start off with his one sword, and like I said, you get a scythe for, well, not from death, but a scythe like death scythe. You actually get like a shuriken that you can throw, and you get a gun, and I believe that's all you get in that game. But you do get other abilities where you can like stab into the ground and blades will shoot up, or sort of a stone type defense power where obviously your defense goes up because you're harder to hurt. But just things like that, nice little elements, and it was very well paced. And of course, you get points to choose what you want to do. And honestly, if you haven't played Darksiders 1, I'd highly recommend just going for the scythe. Like everything with the scythe ended up being like my favorite power because it has such a wide range that using anything else seemed kind of pointless. Like it wasn't as strong as the sword, of course, so it was the speed over strength, but it had such a wide range that it made up for it. Also, the wide range, and I guess just the fact that they put it in the weapon, it knocked back enemies all the time. So, even though it's not as strong, it has knockback plus high speed. So you're surrounded. There was an attack where it basically just spun around you like a tornado, and it would shoot around you, knock everybody back, and then you could just attack whoever you wanted. And you could instantly switch. Like one button would be for the scythe, and then another button would be for the sword. So you could chain your attacks together from the sword to the scythe, and that was pretty cool. And then as for like the shuriken, it would be where you could pretty much toss it through certain things. Like if you threw it through a fire and then threw it to a bomb that wouldn't automatically explode, it would blow up the bomb for you, and that would help you get to a certain area, things like that. And the gun was pretty simple. It would just shoot. There was nothing really special about the gun. I don't believe there were any sort of like charge shots or extra powerful shots. I mean, stronger bullets, sure, but nothing like you hold it down and then it shoots like a super blast or anything like that. But it would just look cool. It was a cool weapon to have in the game, and it was good just for very long range stuff. The characters that you meet in the game are pretty interesting. Some demons, some angels, some sort of in between. And you work with some characters, you fight other characters, and you learn their history in the universe. Like former demon rulers and one character who is I can't think of the name of his race, but he's basically like a great forger. Like his race of people, they forge weapons, and you actually meet his people in the second game. Like you're on their planet, but you meet him and he helps you make a weapon, and you actually play through a portion where you kind of support each other from a distance, and you go through doing that, and that's pretty fun. And fighting him was a bit of a challenge if I remember it. Like you couldn't even shoot him, like it did no damage, and then I finally figured out how to fight him. But you meet cool characters, and I feel like the voice acting was done pretty well. In the first game, War is voiced by, all I can say is Gaara because I don't know the guy's actual name, but it's Gaara from Naruto. If you've seen Naruto in English, he does War, and he does it well. I think for the character who's almost exactly like Gar. He's like, a quiet character who really only speaks when spoken to, and he just says, I didn't do this, or I have to do this, and you're wrong. He pretty much to the point conversations with him, but that's just how they made the character, and I think it was pretty well done. He's a character who's been wronged, and he's trying to prove that he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't destroy the world like everyone seems to think. So it kind of makes sense that he would be sort of a calm, collected character trying to just get his point across and go through his journey. But overall, the game was pretty fun. There was actually like an hour and a half long demo when the game came out, and I think they didn't pick the best part for the demo. Like I played the demo because obviously it's an hour and a half, so I thought I'll easily check this out. It's a huge portion of the game, to give in a demo, so it has to give, a good representation for the game, and it didn't at all to me. I thought this kind of sucks. Like I hate it. Made me not want to get the game because the demo part was so boring. Because the enemies in that specific area were repetitive, and like throughout the game, they're not really that repetitive. Like certain areas have certain enemies, and that's how it is, but generally there would be more than one type of enemy. In this area there was just the one, aside from maybe really small specific portions where you'd fight one different type of enemy, but for the most part they were all the same, and it was a puzzle portion of the game which pretty much lasted the whole hour and a half because it was one dungeon. So you go through, and this was to unlock a new weapon, so you're going through basically doing puzzles and barely getting any of the action portion of the game, and it kind of just felt really boring to me, and it actually made me not want the game. And then eventually I did end up getting it because it was on a Steam sale, so I bought 1 and 2 together because 2 had got such high remarks, and I'd see gameplay and I was like, this is completely different from 1, and it's more RPG than the other one, and you actually change clothing to get higher specs and all that stuff, like really hardcore RPG elements. So I did end up buying 1, and in the end, like I said, the demo wasn't a great representation of the game, but the game itself was actually really fun, and the story I thought was well written, and there are tons of secrets all over the place to find, and stuff that you might go somewhere and it's like you just have to remember there was this random section blocked off that obviously I didn't need to get to, but now that I have this weapon I can go back and like break this wall down and maybe get this or that. Like there's an actual enemy in the game, and he's a weird enemy. He has like a top hat, and he kind of looks like these other demons in the game who are actually really really weak, but he talks and he has like a British accent and a top hat and a cane, and you just randomly find him in specific areas of the game. And I think I found him twice. I know he's in there more than that, but you fight him and he's actually a really tough opponent, but it was just like a random secret character that you find just going through the game and getting into these secret areas. So that was a really cool special thing to find in the game. It's like an actual person who has nothing to do with the main story, but he is a character that you actually fight. He's like a random hidden boss type of thing. So I did love that. Was one of my favorite things about the game, was that. But overall, definitely check out Darksiders 1 because it's a good game, and of course that'll lead you right into Darksiders 2, which it takes place during 1, and it actually ends at the end of 1, which I thought was really interesting because I thought it would sort of start off, during 1 and end after 1, which unfortunately it doesn't because I really wanted to see how 1 ended or what happened after the end of 1, which I won't spoil for anybody. But it starts off you're playing as Death, and he knows that war was wronged, so he's basically going through his game instead of trying to prove that war um, didn't start the apocalypse. Death is going through the game trying to revive humans on Earth, and so you go through this experience, and in this game you fight tons of different enemies. Like the first game had a lot, but this one has way more. You fight just all types of crazy bosses. There side quests, and then of course the main missions in the game. There are tons and tons of weapons. Some like you can get a bunch of different abilities compared to the first one. I think you can really only get maybe 5 or 6 total, and you could use 4 at a time. And in this one, total you can unlock about, I think, 12 abilities, or probably more than that. But there are all types of defense and attack, and upgrade strength for a specific amount of time, and get more health depending on what weapon you use, and all types of upgrades that you have, because this game has a lot more RPG elements. And the best thing about it is the fact that the first one, like I mentioned, has RPG elements, and this one takes it to the full level. Each weapon, you get your scythes, and then you get a side weapon, which can either be a fast but weak weapon, which would be like gauntlet type weapons, or glaives, which are just weapons with blades on them, or gauntlets with blades on them. You can get just simple fighting weapons, huge giant slow hammers that have a lot of strength, and then you can also create weapons, or get possessed weapons, which is some of the coolest things in the game. It's definitely one of the best RPG features in the game, where you get possessed weapons. And what it is, it starts off pretty simple. It's like a fairly weak weapon, and then you can pretty much sacrifice pretty much any item you have in the game, any item of clothing or any other weapon, to this specific weapon, and it'll show you how much it'll upgrade to the next level. And I think each one has 5 levels, so you go through, and each level you go up, you get to choose what stats you want. Like sometimes it'll be higher strength, sometimes it'll be a higher percentage to get a critical strike, sometimes it'll be a special element. So sometimes you could end up with an electrical weapon. It'll be like you can just choose what you want, electricity or fire, if it gives you the option. Not all of them do, unfortunately, but each one will give you at least something that you want for that weapon, that'll be really special and unique for that weapon. Like I have, they're like sort of like stone gauntlets, and they work amazing. Like fortunately, I bought them from a character who's actually in the first game, Volgrim, I think his name is, who's played by Mark Hamill, by the way. That's Luke Skywalker, if you didn't know, or Joker from the Batman games and Batman the animated series. But I bought the weapons, possessed weapons, from him, and I was really fortunate because, like my friend mentioned, he bought some, and they completely sucked for him, and then mine were like absolutely amazing. And once I got them, I've used them through the whole game because they work so well, and they're really fast weapons, but they also give me health and magic when I attack the enemies, and they have thunder elements to them. So like there's all these elements that work perfectly together. So they're super fast. Every hit gives me a little bit of health and magic, and sometimes I can shock enemies. So they just each weapon varies, and like I said, it could be the fast weapons like that, or it can end up being like a slower weapon. And sometimes it can even just be you can get scythes that are possessed weapons, and you can make them your own pretty much. But the game has hundreds of weapons, and obviously each weapon and every piece of armor you have will have specific levels, from I believe white to purple, purple being the best. And You go through certain items you can't use because you aren't high enough at the level yet, and certain items, they have, like it's really good, but then like it could be really good because it gives you a lot of health, and then you get another weapon that's a lot stronger, but you realize it's a lot harder because later in the game, enemies get more difficult, or you just have to fight more enemies at once, and sometimes it's just hard to fight when you aren't constantly regaining health. So you really have to go through certain areas, and it's like, okay, I can't beat them, because I'm trapped in this area. I can't leave and heal, so I have to switch back to something else, which you can easily do on the fly. You can just go in your menu, switch your items up, and then go back into the fight, and you'll be good. But the story for that game is also very well done. Just like in the first one, you go through, you meet characters who will have all sorts of side quests for you, which are all really fun to do. You get little story elements from each of them. You learn about, the characters' histories and things like that. And also, you just get to fight certain bosses that you wouldn't fight if you didn't, bother to follow through with the missions. Like, there's a specific boss in, I believe it's like the Land of the Dead or something like that. And I found him before I actually got the mission, and he was impossible to beat. Like, I just couldn't do it. And then, I upgraded, I went through a few levels, and I actually got the mission to fight this character. And he was still fairly difficult, but it was a lot easier because I had actually advanced like a couple of levels. And, I was able to really take him down, but when I found him beforehand, it was impossible. Like, he'd hit you, and you'd end up being frozen, and you would lose so much health while you're frozen, and it would just drain until you were able to break out. And it was just really hard to do it, but you could just go pretty much wherever you want, just like the first one, aside from specific areas because you need this item or this ability or something like that. You can just go around, and you just find certain items, or even find characters in the game. People, well, not people, but artifacts or demons and things like that that might be hidden throughout the world, and you can end up going to them, and you just get like a random side mission that'll lead you to a random location that you had no idea was even in the game. Fun things like that just make the game entertaining, aside from the basic, main story, which leads you through a lot more than you would actually expect. And it's actually really fun how they work through the game, because there's actually time travel involved once you get later into it, and you meet characters that were in the first game, and you actually meet them during their prime and things like that. And so you get to see how powerful they really were compared to how powerful they are now, when you saw them in the first game and they had been stripped of power or were beaten by someone else, things like that. So it was a cool way to go through the game. I always like when games do that, where you get to experience the second portion but meet characters from the first portion in their prime and things like that. But each game, very fun. I know this is a super long video, which I guess most of my videos are, but this one, obviously with two games, I really like to get into full detail with them. But definitely check out Darksiders 1 and 2. And hopefully, because like I said early on, I don't know who ended up with the property for Darksiders from THQ, but hopefully, whatever THQ is working on, which I heard was actually a 4-player game, which makes sense based on certain things that happened. But hopefully, whoever ended up with that will keep the game, or keep the franchise going, and we'll get a Darksiders 3, and it'll have really cool 4-player co-op, and hopefully, more great story, because the story generally involving the Four Horsemen, when it's done well, it's done well. And Darksiders definitely does it well. So check out Darksiders 1 and 2. You can definitely get them for cheap now because they're pretty old games. But check out Darksiders 1 and 2. If you watch this far, comment below. Let me know what you think of the games. And, just thanks for watching.